As we all know, and my two colleagues who presented earlier, there are certain things happening on the world stage that is preventing the control of the cost of doing business. And so the other part of the ease of doing business is something that the private sector would always look out for. And so the question you should ask is, what's your view of this budget? And so given that introductory remark, our view is that the budget is a fair one, which is a good budget, because it will help the private sector focus, and this budget is focused on a resilient recovery and also on future recovery. And therefore, that for the private sector is a good focus for us. As Rabi has just alluded to, the tax regime, which was restructured over the last 2 years, has been left generally unchanged in this budget to provide policy consistency, as Fantasha had alluded to. And so that word consistency for the private sector is key. And when it's consistency over a period of time, it gives that assurance to the private sector that they believe in the budget and the economic principles going forward. And so the impact, what impact does this budget have on the private sector? Generally, it is an extension of the previous budget, and then it's just like a bit of a rollover. And the previous budget assisted the private sector during those difficult times, and we are confident that this budget will continue the work that the previous budget had started. So as an example, Rabi talked about the tax clearance. I won't talk too much on the technical side of it, but I'll talk on the ease side of doing business. And so that tax clearance limited was increased to $10,000, and so this has certainly assisted the private sector, because it allows for efficiencies. And if there's any efficiencies in a process, then private sector grabs it with both hands. And therefore, that efficiency, that increase to 10,000, has provided an efficiency that private sector always asks for and is very grateful when it is granted. Another one, again, Rabi had also alluded to, is the 21-day business visa on arrival for limited countries. So the key word there is limited. And so from a private sector perspective, we would like to ask government if they would consider opening it up from just the limited few that they have to include countries like India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and the Philippines, because most of our manufacturing sector, they bring in technicians from these countries to replace the blue-collared Fijian workers who are now transitioning into the labor skills mobility. And therefore, there has left a gap in Fiji, in the industries here in Fiji, in terms of employability. The private sector wants skilled workers. And so if the skilled workers choose to go and work overseas rather than work in Fiji, we can't stop that. In fact, we applaud it, because it means remittances will be coming back to Fiji, hopefully, and it will mean that a lot more money is transacted. And so, therefore, for us as a private sector, we want to work with government to plug that gap in the long term, and which means that it's a tripartite between government, the registered training organizations being the universities, and private sector working out a strategy to bridge the skills gap issue that we are facing for the past couple of years. And so we would like to ask government if they would consider those other countries